The first thing I heard was Wanda's voice coming through the kitchen floor. I was flat on my back in the crawl space, flashlight clenched in my teeth, wrench in my right hand, working on a water line that had been dripping since Tuesday. The space down there is tight, maybe 18 inches between the dirt and the underside of the floorboards. I've been in that crawl space a dozen times over the years. I know every pipe, every joist, every place the insulation has sagged. What I didn't know was what my daughter sounded like when she thought no one could hear her. "He's further along than we thought," she was saying. Her voice came through the gaps in the old hardwood, calm and flat, like she was talking about a work deadline. "Carver's ready to sign off. We can file the guardianship papers by the end of the month." I stopped moving, stopped breathing, near enough. Guardianship. I lay still in that crawl space for a long time after she hung up. The dripping pipe kept doing its thing. The flashlight started to dim. I didn't move. When I finally pulled myself out and went upstairs, I washed my hands at the kitchen sink. Wanda was in the living room watching TV. She looked up and smiled and asked if I'd fixed the leak. I told her not yet, needed a different fitting. She nodded and went back to her show. That was 3 weeks before everything broke open. And that was the moment I stopped being confused and started being careful. My name is Earl Braddock. I'm 67 years old. I restore antique furniture out of a workshop in the basement of my house in Pittsburgh, the same house I've lived in for 29 years. I've been doing restoration work since I was 36, mostly wood, mostly American pieces from the late 1800s through the early 1900s. It's slow, detailed work. You have to be patient. You have to pay attention. You have to read what's in front of you before you pick up a single tool. Turns out those same habits work pretty well outside the workshop. My wife June passed 14 months ago. Heart failure, the doctors said. She was 64. We had 38 years together, and I won't dress it up. Losing her was the hardest thing I've ever gone through. When you spend that long building a life with someone and then one morning she's just gone, the house gets quiet in a way that doesn't go away. You just learn to carry it. 6 months after the funeral, Wanda called and said she and her husband Dale were worried about me being alone. The house was too big. Something could happen and nobody would know. She cried on the phone, said she couldn't sleep thinking about it. I said, yes, come on. That was my mistake. Not the only mistake I ever made, but it was the one that nearly cost me everything I'd spent my life building. Dale Pruitt is 43. Used to work in real estate, residential sales mostly. He's the kind of man who fills a room without adding anything to it. Always moving, always watching, always running quick numbers behind his eyes. But he treated Wanda well enough as far as I could see, and I had no reason to think otherwise. What I didn't know was that 6 months before they moved in, Dale had received a $50,000 wire transfer from an offshore account connected to a man named Roy Callahan. Roy Callahan is 55 years old, private estate attorney out of Philadelphia, well-dressed, well-spoken, and by every appearance a legitimate professional. He'd been investigated twice before, once in New Jersey and once in Delaware for elder financial exploitation. Nothing stuck either time. He was careful, he was patient, and he always made sure someone else was holding the paper when things got legal. The changes after Wanda and Dale moved in were gradual. That's the thing about this kind of situation. When it's done right, you don't notice it happening. You just slowly find yourself somewhere you never intended to be. First, it was the paperwork. Dale offered to organize my files, said I had decades of records scattered around, and it would be good to get things straight. I thought he was being helpful. He spent 2 weekends going through everything at my desk in the study. Business records, financial statements, property documents. I let him do it. Then my social circle started to shrink. My card-playing buddy Hank Bellamy, 15 years of Thursday night games, suddenly got too busy to call. My former business partner, Scott Mercer, who used to drop by the workshop every few weeks to look at whatever I was working on, stopped coming around. When I mentioned it to Wanda, she'd say something like, "Those guys were never that close to you, Dad. They just came around because of Mom." I believed her. That's the part that still sits wrong with me. I believed her because grief had already knocked my footing loose and she knew exactly where to push. Then came Dr. Glenn Carver. Wanda brought him in about 6 weeks after they moved in, said he was a specialist who checked on older people after a major loss. Very routine, very standard. I sat across from him at my own kitchen table for 40 minutes while he asked about June, about my sleep, about whether I had trouble remembering things. I was 67 and I'd lost my wife of 38 years. Of course I wasn't sleeping right. Of course I sometimes stood in a doorway and forgot what I came for. I told him that. He nodded, wrote things down, and said it was all very understandable. What I didn't know was that what he was writing had nothing to do with understanding me. He was building a file, a legal history of cognitive decline, carefully worded and backdated, designed to hold up in a guardianship proceeding. His job, the job Wanda and Dale were paying him for out of a separate account I knew nothing about, was to turn my normal grief into a diagnosis that would strip me of the legal right to manage my own affairs. My workshop collection, my house, my $680,000 retirement account, all of it would pass to a court-appointed guardian. Wanda and Dale had already arranged who that would be. I didn't know any of this the night I lay in that crawl space, but I was about to find out everything. The morning after I heard Wanda's voice through the floor, I drove to a diner 4 miles from the house and called Neil from the parking lot. Neil is my oldest. 38 years old, works as a federal financial investigator out of a field office in Cleveland. He's not the kind of man who panics. He's also not the kind of man who calls his father at 12:13 in the morning unless something is already in motion. I told him what I'd heard. There was a pause on his end that lasted longer than I liked. "Dad," he said, "I need you to listen and not react until I'm finished." He'd been watching Dale's finances for 2 months. A tip from a colleague who recognized a pattern, the $50,000 wire, the offshore account. Roy Callahan, whose name had come up in 2 previous federal investigations that never went anywhere because Callahan was smart enough to keep his hands clean and other people's names on the documents. Neil told me the full plan as he understood it. Callahan was the architect. Dale was the executor. Wanda was the access point, the one who got them inside the house and kept me off balance. Dr. Carver's role was to create a paper record of cognitive decline that would satisfy a probate judge. Once the guardianship was granted, control of my assets would transfer legally and I'd have no standing to fight it. My workshop collection, which I'd spent 31 years building, was currently worth around $2 and $1 million by any honest appraisal. Dale had already arranged for an associate to value it at $380,000. My house in Pittsburgh's north suburbs was worth $540,000. My retirement account sat at $680,000. In total, they were looking at roughly $3.3 million in assets, and they had a legal mechanism in place to take all of it. I asked Neil what we were going to do. "We're going to let them finish building the trap," he said, "and then we're going to make sure they're standing inside it when it closes." He told me to go home and act like nothing had changed. Don't get angry. Don't tip Wanda off. Don't do anything different. I drove back to the house, walked in through the side door, and told Dale the dripping pipe was fixed. He said great without looking up from his phone. I went down to the workshop and stood there for a while with my hands on my workbench. There was a 1902 oak library table in the shop that I'd been restoring for 3 weeks. I looked at it for a long time. Then I picked up a piece of sandpaper and got back to work. The next day I started on the box. It wasn't complicated. Flat walnut case about the size of a shoebox with tight dovetail joints and a clean finish. Something that looked like it might hold old letters or fishing gear. I put it together over 2 evenings in the workshop while Wanda and Dale watched TV upstairs. Inside fitted into a carved recess in the base. I placed a high-definition audio recorder, small unit, long battery life, activated by sound. The walnut shell was important. Dale had swept the house twice with an RF detector since they moved in, always under the excuse of checking the Wi-Fi signal. What he didn't know, because he'd never worked with wood in his life, was that dense hardwoods absorb and scatter radio frequencies. The recorder inside that walnut box was invisible to his sweeper. I set the box on the shelf in the living room between a lamp and a stack of old magazines and left it there. Then I got worse. Not really. But to Wanda and Dale, I started seeming like I was slipping faster. I'd call Dale by the wrong name at the dinner table. I'd ask Wanda the same question twice in one sitting. I'd stand in the doorway of a room with a blank look until one of them guided me in. I gave them everything they needed to feel like the plan was working ahead of schedule. Comfortable people talk. That's something I learned early in the restoration business. When a seller thinks you don't know what a piece is worth, they tell you everything. My neighbor Loretta Haynes came by on a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after I set up the box. Loretta is 66, retired from Child Protective Services after 28 years. She's not the type who drops in for coffee and small talk. When she knocked on the door, she had the look of someone who'd been deciding whether to come over for a while. She told me she recognized Dr. Carver's car. She'd seen it before, parked outside the home of a man named Pete Dunmore, a 71-year-old retired electrician who lived 3 streets over. Pete had been sharp, healthy, fully independent. 6 months after Carver started making house calls, Pete was declared legally incompetent. His estate was liquidated. He was moved to a facility. He died 11 months later. Loretta had filed a report at the time. Nothing came of it. I told her something was going to come of it this time. I asked her to write down everything she remembered about Pete Dunmore and the timeline of what happened to him. She said she already had it written down. She'd been keeping notes for 2 years, waiting for a reason to use them. I called Neil that night from the truck, parked around the block. He already knew about Pete Dunmore. It was one of 6 similar cases his office had connected to Callahan's network across 3 states. None had resulted in charges because by the time anyone looked closely, the paper trail led to local attorneys and physicians who claimed they were acting in good faith. Callahan's name never appeared on anything. "This time it will," Neil said. "He told me to keep the recorder running, he told me to keep up the act, and he told me that when the time came, I'd know what to do." 3 nights later, the recorder caught something that stopped me cold. I was in the workshop at close to midnight pulling the memory card to transfer the files to the encrypted drive Neil had sent me. I put on the headphones and started listening to that evening's recording. Wanda and Dale in the living room. Normal enough at first. Then Dale left to get something from upstairs and Wanda made a call. A man's voice on the other end. Low, unhurried, the kind of voice that belongs to someone who has done this before. "How's the father holding up?" he asked. "Right on schedule," Wanda said. "Carver thinks we can move the filing up by 2 weeks." "Good. And the workshop inventory, Dale has that sorted?" "He's got someone coming in next week to do the revised appraisal." A short pause. Then the man said, "What about June's account, the secondary one she had in her name only?" Wanda's voice dropped. "That's already been handled." I sat in the workshop with the headphones on and the lights off for a long time after that. June's account, I hadn't known about a secondary account. But more than that, it was the way Wanda said it, already been handled. Not already closed or already transferred. Handled, like it was something that needed to be dealt with and now wasn't a problem anymore. I thought about what Neil had told me when I first called him. How he'd paused before he spoke. How he'd said, "I need you to listen and not react." I was starting to understand why he'd said that. Neil flew in on a Thursday and we met at a diner on the other side of the river. He had a folder with him. He set it on the table between our coffee cups and let me go through it at my own pace. The first thing in the folder was a summary of Roy Callahan's known activity over 12 years. 6 confirmed cases across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Elderly targets, all of them either widowed or recently bereaved. All of them isolated from their social networks within the first few months of contact. All of them subjected to a medical evaluation by a physician connected to Callahan's network. 5 of the 6 had lost control of their estates through guardianship proceedings. 4 of the 5 had died within 14 months of being moved to a facility. The 6th case was still open. That was mine. The second thing in the folder was a bank statement. It showed a $50,000 transfer into Dale's personal account, originating from a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. The transfer had gone through 8 months ago, 2 months before Wanda called me crying about being worried I was alone. The third thing was a printout of an email exchange between Dale and a property appraiser named Brent Winslow. They were discussing how to document the workshop collection at $380,000 without the appraisal looking obviously fraudulent. Winslow had suggestions. He'd done this kind of work before. I closed the folder and drank my coffee. Neil told me the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had been building toward Callahan for 2 years. They had the offshore accounts, the pattern across states, the paper trail from his Philadelphia office. What they didn't have was Callahan physically present at a target location on record, directing the final steps of a specific fraud. They needed that to make the charges stick at the federal level. Without it, Callahan would find a way to make Dale and Wanda the responsible parties and walk away clean. "Again, we need him in the house," Neil said. On audio, telling Dale what to do next. I asked him how we were going to make that happen. Neil slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a document drafted to look like an amendment to my existing will. The amendment appeared to transfer direct ownership of the workshop collection to Dale, bypassing the guardianship process entirely and saving Callahan's network several weeks of legal procedure. It was the kind of shortcut a greedy man couldn't look at without reaching for it. The document was a fake. Every clause was carefully constructed to appear legitimate while being legally unenforceable. Neil's office had prepared it with a federal prosecutor. The goal was to get it in front of Dale, let Dale call Callahan, and bring Callahan to Pittsburgh to finalize what he'd think was a faster path to the money. I told Neil I'd get it done. I left the document on the corner of my desk in the study that evening, tucked under a coffee mug, like I'd set it down and forgotten it. I made sure Dale saw me moving away from the desk in one of my foggy shuffles. It took him less than an hour to find it. I heard him on the phone with Wanda in the kitchen, voices low but not low enough. I heard Wanda say, "Call Roy tonight." Callahan drove up from Philadelphia 2 days later. black sedan, leather briefcase, the practiced ease of a man who considered this kind of trip routine. He didn't knock like a guest. He used a key. I hadn't given anyone a copy of my house key. I noted that and said nothing. He sat at my kitchen table. I sat across from him. I moved slow, kept my eyes a little unfocused, let him talk to Dale like I wasn't fully tracking the conversation. Callahan walked through the amendment document, explained to Dale exactly which accounts to use for the transfer, how to time the filing, how to handle the appraisal paperwork from Brent Winslow to make the numbers line up. All of it was going straight into the walnut box on the shelf 6 feet away. When Callahan finished, he looked at me with the particular expression of a man who has decided another person is no longer a factor worth accounting for. Then he asked me to initial the bottom of the first page. I put my hands flat on the table. Before I do that, I said, I want to make sure I understand what I'm signing. I read the document out loud, every line, every clause, every defined term, slowly and clearly, the way I'd read contracts for 31 years. I watched Callahan's face go through several different expressions in the space of about 10 seconds. By the third clause, he understood what was happening. By the fifth, he was calculating whether the door was closer than the window. I looked up at him when I finished. Does this language mean what I think it means? I asked. That I'm transferring direct ownership of the workshop collection to Dale with full understanding of the asset value? Callahan said yes. He said it because he thought agreeing was still the fastest way out of the room. He had just confirmed on audio that I understood exactly what I was signing. He had destroyed the centerpiece of his own legal strategy. A man can't be declared cognitively incompetent and simultaneously be documented as understanding the precise terms of a complex asset transfer. I set the pen down on the table. The knock at the front door came 40 seconds later. Neil came in first. 2 FBI agents behind him. 2 more through the back. It was quiet and fast and nothing like what you see in movies. Callahan stood up and the agent closest to him put a hand on his shoulder, and that was the end of it. Dale was in the hallway, and he froze when he saw the badges. Wanda came down the stairs and stopped on the 4th step and looked at me. I looked back at her and didn't say anything. Dale started talking before anyone asked him a question. He said Callahan's name 4 times in the first 30 seconds. Said he had documents. Said he could explain the whole structure. Said he would cooperate completely. He was still talking when they walked him out to the driveway. Loretta Haynes was standing at the edge of her yard watching. She caught my eye and gave a short nod. I nodded back. The FBI agent who took possession of the walnut box asked me what it was. I told him to be careful with it, that everything they needed was inside. The federal courthouse in Pittsburgh is a cold-looking building on Grant Street. I've driven past it 100 times over the years without giving it much thought. The morning I walked up those steps, I noticed how solid it felt underfoot. Old granite, well-maintained, built to last. Neil sat beside me in the courtroom. Loretta Haynes came too, on my other side. She'd submitted a written statement about Pete Dunmore and the timeline of what happened to him. The prosecutor had used it to establish Callahan's pattern across multiple victims. Without Loretta paying attention 2 years ago and keeping her notes, that piece of the case would have been a lot harder to build. Dale Pruitt testified for 3 days. He gave them everything, the full structure of the operation, the offshore accounts, the network of appraisers and physicians Callahan had been using across multiple states, the communications between Callahan and Wanda that Dale had witnessed directly. Whatever else you want to say about Dale, he understood quickly that the only difference between 10 years and 30 was how cooperative he decided to be. Roy Callahan's attorney tried to argue that his client was a legitimate estate planning professional who had been misled by his clients. The prosecution played 43 minutes of audio from the walnut box. After that, the attorney stopped making that argument. Dr. Glenn Carver tried to claim he had acted in good faith based on the information Wanda provided him. The prosecutor introduced records showing 14 wire transfers from a shell account into a personal account Carver maintained separately from his practice. After that, the attorney stopped making that argument too. The sentences came down on a Tuesday. Roy Callahan received 25 years. The judge noted that investigators had connected him to 5 previous cases with similar patterns, and that 4 of those targets had died in facilities within 14 months of losing their estates. She said the word predatory twice before she finished reading the sentence. Dr. Glenn Carver received 18 years and lost his medical license permanently. Dale Pruitt received 10 years, reduced from a potential 22 in exchange for full cooperation. He didn't look at Wanda when they let him out. Wanda Braddock received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The additional charge, the one that turned a fraud case into something much heavier, had come out of the investigation into June's secondary bank account. Neil had flagged it early. The FBI brought in a forensic accountant who traced a series of withdrawals in the final 4 months of June's life, withdrawals that funded payments to a home pharmacy supplier. The supplier's records showed recurring orders for a medication that, in the dosages documented, would accelerate cardiac deterioration in a patient with a pre-existing arrhythmia. June had been diagnosed with a minor arrhythmia 2 years before she died. Her cardiologist had her on a standard management protocol. What her cardiologist didn't know was that someone in the house had been supplementing that protocol without telling anyone. When the prosecutor read that portion of the findings out loud in the courtroom, I kept my eyes straight ahead. I didn't look at Wanda. I didn't need to. The courtroom doors closed behind her, and I sat there for a minute before I stood up. Neil put his hand on my shoulder and didn't say anything. That was the right call. There wasn't anything to say. I went home and I went down to the workshop. The 1902 oak library table was still there, right where I'd left it. I'd been working on it for almost 2 months by that point. Previous owner had refinished it badly sometime in the 1970s. Layers of the wrong product applied over decades of the wrong decisions, all of it obscuring what was underneath. I'd spent most of those 2 months stripping it back carefully a little at a time until I could see the original wood again. The wood underneath was good, better than good. Quarter-sawn white oak, tight grain, cut well. The kind of material that lasts 100 years if you treat it right and leave it alone when it needs to be left alone. I picked up where I'd left off. About a month after the sentencing, a letter arrived from the Federal Correctional Facility, Wanda's handwriting on the envelope. 4 pages inside, going back and forth between apologies and explanations. A lot of it about how Callahan had manipulated her, how things had gotten out of hand, how she hoped someday I might find a way to forgive her. The last paragraph asked me to leave a specific account alone. One the investigators hadn't found, she'd kept it separate, said it was for Clyde's future. I read all 4 pages, then I walked out to the workshop, opened the door on the cast iron stove I used to heat the space in winter, and put the letter in. Stood there and watched it go. My grandson Clyde is 15. He comes down to the workshop on weekends when Neil brings him to visit. He's got steady hands and he pays attention, which is most of what this work requires. I've been teaching him joinery. How to fit 2 pieces of wood together, so tight you don't need a single nail. How to read the grain before you make a cut. How to fix something that's been broken without pretending the break never happened. Last month he told me he wants to go into law. Said he wants to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to other people. I told him that was as good a reason as any to do something with your life. The workshop still smells like sawdust and linseed oil, same as it always did. Some mornings I come down here before it's fully light, and just stand at the bench for a while before I start. It's quiet in a way I've made my peace with. June would have had something to say about the state of my workbench. She always did. I think about her every day. I'll do that for the rest of my life, and I'm not trying to change it. What I know now that I didn't know 14 months ago is this. The people who want to take what you've built will almost always come at you through someone you trust. They count on you being too tired, too grief-stricken, or too decent to believe what's right in front of you. The best thing you can do is stay observant. Document what you see, and don't wait for someone else to act on what you already know. If any part of this story sounds familiar to you, pay attention to that feeling. Talk to someone outside the house. Guardianship fraud is real, and it is more common than most people want to believe, and the people who run these operations are professionals who have done it before. You built what you have. Don't let anyone take it while you're looking the other way.